Through the course of the campaign, a number of people told me that if I won election, I'd be disappointed because Secretary of State is just a boring administrative job. Well, I don't know what Secretary of State office they were talking about, but it's not mine.
Yeah, you are busy. I want to talk about some of those things you're busy with, but before I do that, the governor yesterday just called for a special session. It doesn't involve you directly, except for the fact that what they're going to be talking about is more money for fighting forest fires. Forests fall into your bailiwick as a member of the land board. So I guess remotely or peripherally you are involved in this.
Well, I think that's right, and I guess my response to the proposal would be, first and foremost, we obviously need to make sure that we're providing all of the support that we possibly can for the firefighters out there and make sure that they have the resources they need. But having said that, I'm not sure we know what that number is yet. If you look back at the last legislative session, the governor proposed a $25 million firefighting fund, and now he's suggesting we need $55 million. I think it makes sense to me, so long as the cash flow is adequate to maintain the suppression efforts, that we wait until the fires are over and know what the actual bill is before we bring the legislature into session to deal with that.
Well, it's expensive, first of all, to bring the legislature into session. It has to be. I mean, if it has to be, then you do it, but it costs money. But I think you've got a good point there that let's wait until all the bills are there to know what it costs and then pay them.
Sure, because it's not like waiting to convene the special session is somehow impeding the suppression effort or undermining the support for our firefighters. So I think patience is prudent in this case.
Well, in defense of the $55 million over the special session, for that matter, it looks like our fire season is just about waned out. Now, we're still fighting some fires, and some of them aren't even completely contained yet. But it doesn't look like we're going to be having a whole lot more fires.
Well, I certainly hope not, although I think we've seen over the years that crystal balls as they pertain to fire seasons in Montana are not particularly accurate. And so, again, I think it makes sense to wait and see where we're actually at, and then we can make some of those decisions.
Brad, all you got to do is forecast where the lightning's going to hit.
Sure. And I was talking to somebody yesterday that wanted me to make it rain. So it's.
Well, there are certain powers in the Secretary of State's office. I guess that's not one of them, though. Let's talk about caucuses. We're very, very busy in that regard right now and determining dates of caucuses. Seems like every state now is wanting to get earlier and earlier because they want to have a bigger say in presidential nominations. Montana, of course, feeling the same way.
Well, in the last session, David, I pushed very hard to have legislation passed that would have moved our presidential primary from June to February. We were unable to get the $1 million that requires to run a separate standalone election appropriated by the legislature. So our presidential primary remains in June. I want to make clear the fact that we still will have the June presidential primary, irrespective of what the parties decide in terms of caucuses and the like. So all the presidential candidates will be on the ballot in June. Every Montanan that's registered to vote will have an opportunity to vote for the candidate of their choice in the primary. Having said that, I really do believe that the June presidential primary in Montana in today's atmosphere is completely irrelevant. We have absolutely no say whatsoever in terms of picking either party's candidate for president.
Well, with every state rushing to the front of the line like they are, it's going to be a foregone conclusion.
Absolutely.
As far as the nominees are concerned.
The decision will be made long before we actually go to the polls and cast that vote. And that's one of the reasons that the Republican Party went ahead and made the rule change to create this caucus in February so that we at least on the Republican side can weigh in prior to the time when the decision is made. Now, I think the way we front-loaded these primaries, we've done something that we didn't probably intend to do collectively, and that is we've essentially created a one-day national presidential primary. I think we will know the nominee of both parties by the morning of February the 6th. I'm not sure that's a positive thing for the process, and I say that because if you think back over time, we can look at candidate after candidate that was a front runner in early February and ended up not being the party's nominee. And I think for us to end the vetting process this early is probably a mistake. And what the caucus idea is not an ideal solution to the problem, but in the short term, it puts Montana, at least on the Republican side, in a stronger position. I still would opt for the early presidential primary, but more than that, and this is where I think all of this will ultimately lead, is the adoption nationally of a regional rotating primary, country divided into 4 regions, and every fourth presidential election, Region A will go first.
Yeah. Now, you proposed this idea, I believe, to the National Association of Secretaries of State, didn't you?
Well, that's actually it's a proposal that came out of a committee of the National Association of Secretaries of State. I took a resolution to the Council of State Governments.
Oh, okay.
And that was adopted unanimously at their meeting earlier this summer. So there's support growing for the concept, and I don't think anyone's going to be particularly happy with the way the process unfolds in 2008, not this year, but in the cycle.
With 4 regions, I can see one region being very happy and 3 of them being unhappy. How would you do this? You're going to rotate it around to all 4 of them every 4 years, I guess. Is that right?
Exactly. There would be originally a lottery to determine which of the 4 regions goes first, and then from that point on, there'll be a regular and predictable rotation, so that each region will know when they're going to be first in line in a presidential year. But the way things are going now, obviously not everybody can be first unless we create that one-day national primary, and I just think that's a mistake.
Well, I can see that these caucuses is probably a good stopgap, because it's a good Band-Aid on the problem, maybe a little better than a Band-Aid. As people have a chance to make their choices known before the rest of the country has already decided. Having the rest of the country decide and have it a foregone conclusion, that affects to a great deal the voting in Montana, doesn't it?
Well, it does. We again look back at history. Montana in the presidential primaries has almost always voted for the nominee that's already been determined. I mean, everybody likes to vote for a winner, and I think that's been the effect of the late primary. I want to point out a couple of things about the structure of the caucus as the Republicans adopted it that I think are very positive. Under the old system, we had a delegate convention where there was a maximum of about 350 delegates that could participate and vote for the 25 delegates that we send to the national convention. Under the caucus system, that number of potential delegates for that convention or for the caucuses expands to about 3,000. So we've increased by almost tenfold the level of potential participation in that process. Plus, we've moved it early enough so that it really will have an impact. I suspect we will see some presidential candidates in Montana as a result of this rule change, and I think that's positive. I think it's important to point out to folks that at no time, at least in my time in Montana over 27 years, has the presidential primary been the vehicle by which we elected delegates. That's a misconception. The presidential primary in 2008 will have exactly the same impact in terms of selecting delegates that it had in 2004, and that is none. Absolutely none. It's nothing but a non-binding beauty contest, and we'll maintain that.
Isn't that what the straw polls are, though? You know, you talk about New Hampshire, Iowa. Isn't that what it is, really, just a kind of well, you call it a beauty contest? For the lack of a better phrase, that's a good one. I'll use that.
Well, I think in Iowa, for example, those caucuses actually result in selecting candidates or delegates who are bound to a particular candidate at least through the first ballot at the convention, and that's what our caucus will do. Those delegates, for the first time, will actually be bound to vote for the candidate that they've declared their support for in the caucus, which means that they on first ballot they'll have to go and vote for Giuliani or Romney or whoever they were elected to support.
Brad Johnson, our